Welcome back into the Conference USA podcast roundtable for our final game of the week preview of the regular season. We made it to the end, and what a Conference USA season it has been. We have a play-in game of sorts this weekend taking place between Jacksonville State and Western Kentucky, a game that a lot of people had circled as a big late season matchup because of its championship implications. And of course, as I just previously stated, it's a win and you're in. The Hilltoppers will travel to Jacksonville and face the Gamecocks. It kicks off at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, and is on ESPN Plus. Joining us today, our friends over at Topper Talk, Stephen Moffitt and Caleb Williams of the 700 Pelham Road Podcast, our Jacksonville State representative. Gentlemen, I'm super excited to have you guys on. Thanksgiving, though, just happened, guys. I hope everyone had a great time with their family. Of course, you, the viewer, did as well. But there's no better time than to be playing meaningful football this late in the year. And I guess this is familiar territory for both of these programs, but really more importantly, for one, Coach Helton there in Bowling Green. Moff, I'm going to throw this one over to you to kick us off as the road team. The gauge on Bowling Green fans has been a tough one, to say the least. What was the level of excitement? Is there a level of urgency just to get back to the Conference USA Championship game because of this expectation and standard that Helton has held for himself in his tenure in Bowling Green?
Yeah, it's so much deja vu from last year, having to kind of win and play yourself into that conference title game position. But yeah, the expectations remain high. I mean, every single year we're picked, a preseason top 2 team, it feels like. And Helton has kind of established that expectation. And he's lived up to it, more years than not. He just obviously hasn't been able to get over that hump and win us a conference championship. We've always ran into some other pretty good teams, or he's been out coached, or just whatever has happened in those games. But the excitement is high in Bowling Green. The season has gone about like most of us had expected. Preseason I expected a loss to Toledo, I expected a loss to LSU. I expected a loss somewhere in conference that would just be that wacky game where we just didn't show up. And it was FIU this year. I really had it penciled in as being La Tech, but it was FIU this year, just a clunker of a game that, in hindsight, you're like, how did that happen? We're a better ball club than that. But, for the year, it's been a good season. It's been competitive, and it really is fitting that it comes down to this sort of game. You have to play and earn your way in, and it's going to be a tough game on the road at Jacksonville State. They're a really solid ball team. Their strength in rushing the ball is our weakness on the defensive side of the ball, even though I feel like we've gotten somewhat better in that area as the season has progressed. It's just going to be a tough game, and they're really good at home. So, to make matters even harder, we're obviously going on the road. Somehow we're road favorites. I don't really know how Vegas shook the 8 ball and figured that one up, but we're road favorites as it opened. So it should be a nice, exciting ball game down there in Jacksonville.
If I had to guess, it's probably that showing you had in Baton Rouge this last weekend. I mean, the offense couldn't get going, but it's hard to move a ball against an SEC defense. But you were able to hold your own on the defensive side of the ball, which, all things considered, the defensive side of the ball has been up and down for the Hilltoppers. But to hold an LSU team to 13 is a lot of promise, if I had to guess. But you go back on your one Conference USA loss, the FIU game, big head scratcher, but don't feel too bad, Moff. You're not the only one that has somehow slipped up to the fighting Willie Simmons. And that takes me over to our other guest today, Caleb. I mean, last we were on here, you beat Kennesaw State. Okay, well, you're in, even if you lose to Western Kentucky in the final week. But now we've thrown a wrench into it. You're the second team in Conference USA. Well, FIU has other wins, but you're the second team that has really thrown a wrench into the Conference USA championship picture by losing to FIU. Can you kind of sum up what in the world happened down in Miami, and what is kind of the reaction that you're seeing there in Jacksonville?
It just felt like Like it, I think I've said this with you. I think I said it with I think I said it last week with the guys at FIU. We were due for one of those games on the road where we finally didn't make the plays down the stretch to win the game, and it showed up this week in the form of turnovers. I mean, Cam Cook losing a fumble just doesn't ever happen, right? Caden Krill doesn't lose fumbles. And we had that happen on back-to-back drives in the fourth quarter. So, just finally caught up to us. But yeah, I think FIU, I mean, we got to get rid of them because if it weren't for them, we would already have our championship matchup going into this week. It would just be determining who would host. So they're the reason Kennesaw is even still in this conversation at this point. So we got to get rid of Willie Simmons because it's criminal what he's done. But no, I don't think the reaction's been anything crazy. Last year we lost a game to Eastern Michigan that we absolutely should not have lost. We got ran off the field by Coastal Carolina to start the season, and you get to the end of the year, and I think a lot of people thought we were the better football team. So, you're just sometimes you're going to lose some games that you don't feel like you should. But the vibes are still high. We're a really good home team, and we know that, we step up and either win this week or get liberty to do what we need them to do. We're right back in the conference championship game. So
not all is lost for the Gamecocks, but as we preview this matchup, on Western Kentucky's side of the offensive side of the ball, going into this year, Maverick McIver was the big storyline, but now it's the young man Rodney Tisdale. He has lived up to the expectations, starting all the way back to that Louisiana Tech game. Moff, you said that was a game you had kind of penciled in potentially as a loss going into the year. Helton showing a lot of confidence in that young man in overtime, going for 2, getting it, able to scramble out. I mean, it's going to be a highlight. It's going to follow him for the rest of his career. But all things considered, taking out the LSU game, you have to be excited about what this kid brings to the table. And once again, getting the nod for what is going to be the biggest game of his young career. What's the confidence level that you have in the young man and to what is going to be the biggest game to this point? And if he wins, he has an even bigger one in the Conference USA Championship the week thereafter. But how are you feeling about Tisdale and his performance thus far?
I feel great about Rodney Tisdale. He's made some young, redshirt freshman head scratcher mistakes, some throws here and there that, will kind of tighten you up and make you go, ooh, whoa, what's a window we don't want to be throwing into, buddy. But for the most part, man, he's got a real cool and calm demeanor on him. He plays with a lot of confidence. And he brings an added versatility to this offense with his legs that, quite frankly, we've never seen under Tyson Helton. We've had a couple runners. Ty Story back several years ago could run, but he was just a strictly, north and south guy. Austin Reed could run a little bit. Caden Beltcamp could run a little bit, but these were all strictly north and south guys. You generally weren't, calling up, RPO plays or rollout plays that were designed runs if nothing was there. He just kind of brings an extra layer, an extra wrinkle to the offense that you have to be aware of, and you have to respect it from the defensive side. So, and he's accurate with the ball. He's got a cannon for an arm. He can push the ball down the field really nicely. He goes through his progressions nicely for a really young quarterback. So, I'm excited for him. I think, granted in the portal age, you never know what year to year is going to bring, but I'm excited for his future if it lies here at Western Kentucky. I know the staff has been high on him since he was a true freshman and got to campus in spring, year before last. As soon as he got to campus and was getting some reps, I started hearing his name chattered amongst the staff like, oh, this kid is, he's got a little pop, a little juice about him. Obviously, I thought it would be a couple of years till we were seeing it on the field and play out, but I'm real excited for what he does for the team, for the offense, and he's proven to be a good leader of the team so far through his first 4 games. So I'm happy and excited for him.
Certainly getting ahead. I got questions about portal season for both of these programs because this will be the last opportunity I really have to talk to you guys as we get into bowl season. But Caleb, over to you. I feel awful that I'm having to ask you this question because I've talked to you a lot at the end of this year, but I haven't asked this question to you in this way. So let's see if I can't throw you a curveball. If you were to be scouting Jacksonville State and how to stop Cam Cook, what would that scouting report be? Is there a way to stop this guy?
With Gavin Wimsatt, I would have said crash the box because, Gavin was really indecisive in the zone read game. And I know that was kind of his downfall, not so much as a passer, but, even when he wasn't throwing the ball well, we knew he could run the ball. But with Caden Creel, he's a willing runner and he's a physical runner. And so it's become a lot harder to crash the box. And so I just don't know if you have a true answer. I think, being sound, fundamentally securing all gaps, like every defensive coordinator is going to say, we have to do that against a team that can run the football the way that we do. But, I'm sure every team that we've played has tried it. And it comes down to we execute really well up front. I didn't think this offensive line was going to be what it is this year, and we execute really well up front. And Caden Creel being not just a good zone read quarterback, but a good designed QB run quarterback. Teams can't crash on Cam anymore. They've got to respect the perimeter. And now that Clint Trickett has started to dial up a lot more shot plays and getting the ball out to the receivers, teams can't stack the box anymore. They're having to start, respecting the downfield passing game a lot more than they could a month ago. And that's made it a lot easier for Cam. Now, with that being said, we saw this last week. If you are able to turn him over in any way whatsoever, that you've won that drive. Generally, if we don't turn the ball over, we're getting 3. It feels like we're guaranteed a field goal. We haven't punted much this year, but if you're able to punch it out, that might be your only answer. Is just when you're bringing him to the ground, punch the ball. That's all I would know to say as a defensive coordinator, because I'm sure they've tried everything else.
Certainly two of the more efficient offenses in Conference USA. How do these defenses stack up in this matchup that is pivotal for making the Conference USA championship? And of course, game predictions from everyone here. Excited to hear that, but stay tuned. We're going to take a second to thank our sponsor. Conseco Group has been transforming visions into reality since 1987. Known for making the impossible possible, they specialize in pre-construction consulting, construction management, design build, and renovations. With a hands-on, client-focused approach, Conseco Group consistently delivers high-quality results while maximizing investment. Based in Nashville and trusted across Middle Tennessee, their reach spans the entire Southeast. Conseco Group, building excellence one project at a time. Learn more at consecogroup.com or call 615-298-9907. Thanks again to the Conseco Group for sponsoring this episode of the Conference USA Podcast Roundtable. I'm joined by two of our partners here at the Roundtable, Stephen Moffitt of Topper Talk, our Western Kentucky affiliate, and then Caleb Williams of the 700 Pelham Road, our Jacksonville State affiliate. Two of the better scoring offenses in Conference USA, both top 4 in total offense. But the real question is how does the defense stack up? Because as we all know, defense wins championships. And back to you, Moff, on that side. We just heard from Caleb talk about how dynamic Cam Cook and Caden Creel offense is with the zone read game. You have to respect, obviously, Cam Cook in the box, but what Caden Creel is able to do with his arm makes this challenging for defenses. How do you feel in this matchup? Because it's not about if Cam Cook gets his yards, it's about when he gets those yards. And how does a defense respond? Because this is an offense that can just get out of hand really fast. And I'm interested to hear your take on how you think this defense has progressed, because what happened in Baton Rouge has got to be promising.
Yeah, Cam Cook is one of those rare running backs that you see a lot of running backs say they get stronger over the course of the game, but Cam is really one of those running backs that you see that truly just seems like as the game goes on, his legs are churning even harder and harder, fighting for those hard yards, those short yards. And it feels like he keeps hitting you with body punches until he busts one, busts a big run that can break the game wide open. So The run defense side of things has definitely been our Achilles heel, our weak point for several seasons. We've seen flashes of it being, much, much better this season, where we've actually, taken good angles, tackled well, everybody's swarming to the ball. Last week's game versus LSU is probably the prime and perfect example of it. I don't think anybody expected us to stand up and play that well against an SEC team. Granted that this is an SEC team that's down and kind of floundering, and is fired at head coach, and is going through a lot of adversity. But still, at the end of the day, that was an SEC team with an SEC offensive line and running back, and a big O tight end, a couple really good wide receivers out on the edge. So I really hope that we can carry over that sort of momentum. And just that sort of sound precision tackling, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of gap discipline. It's going to take a lot of containing the edge, knowing your assignments, having good trained, disciplined eyes that are keeping, just an eye on where your assignment is. Because if you get caught peeking in the backfield, then you got a play action pass going over your head. So, I definitely think this Jacksonville State offense is one that is the one in conference that gives me the most worry, just because of how explosive they can be running the ball, and knowing the fact that they're going to do it, they're going to do it, and it's still just that hard to stop. They've got, the nation's leading rusher, a really good offensive line. They're dealing with a backup quarterback in there leading the charge now, just like we are, and still being just as efficient, if not more. So that tells you a lot about the system. That tells you a lot about the coaching, and just the expectations there when it's next man up, no matter what's going on. It's going to be tough for us. It's going to be a long day at the office. And, like I said earlier, going on the road makes it that much tougher, going to their place, in their house with a rowdy crowd, which I'm sure they're going to have a great crowd and a great environment for the game. It's going to be a heck of a ball game, and it's going to be a very, very big test on our defense.
Hearing Caleb talk about the turnovers for Cam Cook, I mean, Western Kentucky, the fewest forced fumbles in Conference USA this year with just 4. So certainly a storyline that I would say it's going to be hard to repeat itself. I think, like you said, Caleb, the Hilltoppers, if they find a way to punch the ball out, definitely can shake up a game plan for the Gamecocks. But back over to you and Jacksonville State's approach on the defensive side of the ball. Rodney Tisdale, in his last 3 Conference USA games, he's thrown for over 300 yards, 9 touchdowns. I mean, again, who would have thought that sitting behind Maverick McIver was another guy that can throw for 300 yards a game? I could never imagine that Tyson Helton is that great of a recruiter. But, boy, every season he seems to do it over and over. So, Caleb, this guy, now that there's enough tape on him, how confident are you as far as that Gamecock secondary at holding Tisdale at bay, forcing them to run the football?
Well, one of the good things about the secondary, we've seen – especially the last 2 weeks, a lot of chunk plays in the intermediate game. But what have we also seen? We've seen Caleb Nix on the back end keeping teams from taking the top off. I think he's got now, I don't know, I don't think he had another interception last week. But going into last week, he had 6 turnovers in the last 4 games, with 2 that have been house calls. That's kind of one thing we have been able to limit, is we haven't let teams get over the top. Kennesaw State came in taking shots about every other play. They threw 3 red zone interceptions. They threw another one late in the game. So, that's, I don't necessarily say that I like that are, especially the way Western Kentucky plays, kind of that air raid influenced attack where they're not looking to just take shots all the time. They're looking more to scheme you up. It can be concerning, but I think the good news is that, everyone came in expecting the Maverick McIver show, just because, all season he has just lit up the stat sheet. Not just one of the best quarterbacks, one of the best passers of the ball in general. But like you said, Rodney Tisdale come in, and it really doesn't look that much different. And you've now got that added element, of his legs that is a different element to the game than what Maverick McIver brought. He's like Moff said, he's not just a north and south runner. He can get east and west in a hurry if you don't, keep contained. And look, that's concerning when you're a secondary that already sometimes struggles. You don't want the quarterback out there extending the play another 5 seconds. So, I think for us, it's just going to be limiting the chunk plays, finding a way to keep things in front of us as much as humanly possible, and somehow finding a way to keep Rodney Tisdale in the pocket. If we can do that, I at least like our chances of not giving up a lot of sevens, right? I'm fine giving up 3. It's when we start giving up touchdowns that's when we're concerned.
Certainly something to keep an eye on. Both of these offenses have playmakers that can really blow these games wide open, which leads me to my last topic before we get into our game prediction. Guys, this will be my last opportunity as our fellow Jake Gibson will be doing the Conference USA Championship preview with one of you guys next week. I'm interested to hear from you. Both of these teams have elite weapons that have eligibility remaining. Going into this offseason, how concerned? I know, Moff, you already talked a little bit about Tisdale. If he were to exercise his options other places, do we have another Caden Veltkamp situation where you have your obvious QB1 for 2026, but he decides to hit the portal and go to Florida Atlantic? Is Tisdale going to exercise those options? It's so hard to tell when you're talking about 18 to 22-year-old kids and money's floating around at these high-value positions. So, I'm sure with Helton, with any coach in Conference USA at this rate, I would feel the most confident that he's still going to field a competitive roster no matter who decides to leave campus. But is there anyone in particular that I would say nervous, maybe the best word I can think of for lack of a better one, are nervous about guys leaving? Are you nervous about being able to retain this roster for 2026?
Yeah, I think anytime you win a lot of ball games, I think you open yourself up to the eyeballs of other programs kind of seeing, what's going on over there. They're doing something right. They've got a system. They got a formula. They're coaching up players well. They're developing players really well. And, I remember even going back to week 0, we had a true freshman running back starting, Marvis Parrish. And, the joke in the press box was, man, he's going to look really good in the SEC next year, because we just don't start a true freshman running back. And then you see him come out there and play, and he has over 100 all-purpose yards in his first collegiate game, running the ball, catching the ball in the backfield, just being really dynamic. And, you're just like, man, Auburn or Ole Miss or somebody's going to come sniffing around before the season's over. And you hate to think that way, but it's just the reality of college football today that, those type of kids are going to get interest and offers. He's a Georgia boy, so played at a really well-known high school and was productive there, slipped through the cracks, ended up at Western Kentucky and has been productive. Same with Rodney Tisdale. He's a Florida boy from Jacksonville. He has some college tape, and that's when you're the most valuable. When you're just an unknown commodity and you don't have any college tape, usually you just kind of bounce around. You might end up going, moving down a level rather than going laterally or moving up. But now, when those type of guys have some college tape and prove that they can do it at this level and do it at a high level, that's when you get worried about those guys. And, the big SEC schools coming around and just throwing them huge money offers that, quite frankly, at the end of the day, we can't match and we can't offer what they can be offered by other schools. So, I'm always going to be confident in Tyson Helton and his ability to put a roster together. He's proven that, he's earned that benefit of the doubt over several years of having a lot of turnover via the portal. But he always goes out and finds his guys and plug and plays and is really successful and wins a lot of ball games. So, I'm not going to pretend to have any inkling of an idea of who could stay, who could go. In this day and age, I just kind of chalk it up to I assume the worst and I hope for the best. I know Tyson Helton has great relationships with all his players. They have really open and honest exit interviews at the end of the season about what may be best for them or best for the program. And at the end of the day, they make that decision of what to do and where to go, and if they need to enter the portal or not. So, it's a shame that we have to think that way, but guys are definitely going to hit the portal, and Tyson Helton's going to use that as an opportunity to build and hopefully even better roster for next season. But obviously, we hope to try to retain as much of our young talent as possible.
Definitely a challenge for all of Conference USA, but like you said, especially when something's going well, you just can't help it. And I can only imagine what LSU's doing down there. Now, they're still going for their next head coach, and there might be some handshake deals going on at midfield at the end of that game. But Caleb, I think we both agree, and maybe you can tell me I'm wrong, Cam Cook's gone. The Cam Cook experience was fun while it lasted. Conference USA is thankful that he's gone. Past that, Caden Creel is the most Tyler Huff-like quarterback I think you're going to be able to find. And if there was a way to retain him, I don't see a world where Caden Creel leaves because he seems to fit this system pretty darn well. I don't see why he would leave. I'm not saying that he doesn't have the skill set to go to the P4 level, but I think his skill set fits so well with where he is at Jacksonville State. And the only other name that really pops off to me is DeAndre Johnson. At least and prior to the MTSU game, his only skill set was tall. Well, then he pops off for 2 touchdowns against MTSU, and now we have this deep ball threat who averages 30 yards a catch in DeAndre Johnson. I'm sure some P4, because I believe he came from Rutgers. So you've got some P4s that are going to take the risk on him, I would assume, just because of his length, and they see, oh, he can catch the football. He's not just tall. But that's my quick monologue on it. Do you kind of feel that same sentiment, or tell me where I'm off base?
No, look, if Cam Cook is back on roster next year, it is nothing short of a miracle. Obviously, you would never see me complain about it because it would be, I think, our first returning 1,000-yard back since 2016, I think, when Rock Thomas returned for the 2017 year as well. I think that would be the last time we had a returning 1,000-yard back. Generally, if we have a guy run for 1,000 yards, they're either seniors or they're transferring. So yeah, I think Cam is gone. Creel, like you said, I think Creel's going to stay. I just think he's a perfect fit for what Clint Trickett wants to do offensively, which I don't even know that we've necessarily seen that yet this year until the last couple of weeks when they've finally been able to push the ball downfield. DJ, like you said, coming in, we saw 6'8". Okay, no one's going to be able to cover him. Well, for the first 7 or 8 games, it didn't matter because we couldn't get him the ball anyways. And these last 3 weeks, he has gone off. I could see him leaving because he does have the speed to make him being 6'8" matter. I think the biggest threats, honestly, besides that, you're going to see defensively, really. There's a lot of good players on this defensive unit that could probably command some NIL contracts other places. It's honest. I'm happy that Caleb Nix is a senior because he would be gone. You would 100% see him as a starting safety somewhere, probably in the SEC next year if he were not a senior and out of eligibility. But I mean, other than that, I really think those 2 names, Cam Cook and DeAndre Johnson, the only 2 I would just put house money on not being here next year.
Well, as we wrap up the show again, tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern, the Hilltoppers travel to Jacksonville State for that kickoff on ESPN Plus for a spot in the Conference USA Championship game. I'm very appreciative of our 2 guests for joining us today. I'll paint this picture one more time for the listener. The line opened at 2.5, the over-under at 55.5, kind of like a sweet spot for a lot of these Conference USA games, that 55.5 line. Moff, you said earlier in the show that you were surprised that you were favored in this one, but I want to hear from you. Do you have a score prediction for us tomorrow?
Yeah, I do have a score prediction, and as much as I probably should know better, I just have a hard time taking off the red bias goggles sometimes. I like to think we're playing pretty good football right now, but I also know that we're going to be going up against a really good football team and on their home turf. It's going to be an uphill battle. We're going to have to play a pretty flawless game. We can't go in there and have 2 and 3 turnovers. We're going to have to force turnovers on our own and try to gain some extra possessions and or slow the offense down by getting them off the field by turning them over. But I see it coming down to, similar to last year's regular season finale where it was a game-winning field goal in the final seconds. I'm going to go with WKU winning 31-28. A pick that's sure to be wrong, but I think one way or the other, it's going to be a heck of a ball game. It's going to be close and come down to, potentially whoever just has the ball last and can bleed it out and put themselves in position to make a game-winning play, whether it's a kick or pushing it into the end zone.
Stunning. He can't pick against his own toppers even on the road. I know we're all colored me shocked, but I can't blame him. Moff sides with Vegas on this one, covering that 2.5 point spread. Caleb, from you, the Cox have been good at home all season long. Again, 2.5 point dogs at home, 55.5 point over. How do you see this one shaking out?
I mean, look, we're 3-4 on the road. We're 4-0 at home. And every home game we've played, we've won by double digits. I just cannot pick against our guys at home. If this were in Bowling Green, I would probably get run out of Jacksonville for what I'd be saying. But since we're at home, I got to take the Cox. And a close one, though. This is a good Western Kentucky football team. I think pound for pound, I think this is the best coach in Conference USA, and Tyson Helton. Even better than Jerry Mack, even better, even sometimes than Charles Kelly. I think Tyson Helton is the best coach, and he's going to have these guys ready to go. So I'll go Cox. Give me Cox by 3.
It seems to be the recurring choice today, and I'm stunned again that these two homers pick their own teams and leave it to the MTSU guy that's got to be the tiebreaker for this one. Again, you'll be stunned at who I choose in this one. But all personal feelings aside, I think everything Caleb just said is the reason Jacksonville State, I would think, is favored in this matchup. I mean, you're at home. They've been dominant at home. They're a team that was up to last week poised to make the trip to Conference USA Championship. They had a pretty convincing win over Kennesaw State, Xing out that fourth quarter. They looked great. So I can't myself pick against Jacksonville State because it's at home. If it was in Bowling Green, again, exactly what Caleb said. Jacksonville State has played with their food on the road all season long, and they finally got bit this last week in Miami. So because it's at home at Jacksonville State, there is a Conference USA Championship on the line. I will say, not so fast, my friend. I like the Hilltoppers in this one because why the heck not? I don't know why. Vegas knows something that I don't, obviously, because I would think they would be a 7-point favorite, but they're not. So I'm going with Vegas on this one. I like the Toppers by 3. The score I have is 38-35. I think it's really going to come down to which defense makes the first stop. I think both of these offenses are going to be humming from the get-go. I could also see a world where that's not the case, but I like where these offenses are. It's a world where Jacksonville State had all the turnover issues last week. I think they're going to have that cleaned up. Western Kentucky saw the worst of their offense last week against an SEC defense. They'll have all that cleaned up. I think these offenses are going to be great on Saturday. It's going to be much must-watch football on Conference USA at 1 p.m. Central. Again, thanks to Stephen Moffitt of Topper Talk Podcast, Caleb Williams of the 700 Pelham Road. Thanks to you, the viewer, for tuning in for all of our regular season Game of the Weeks. But just know that this is not our last one. One of these guys here will be joining us next week for the finale of the Conference Championship. Super excited to host that one over on our X and Twitter. If you're not already following us at CUSA Roundtable, make sure you do that. Hit the subscribe, or on YouTube at CUSA Podcast Roundtable. Thanks again for tuning in, and to the Conseco Group for sponsoring today's episode. And we will see you all next week for the Conference USA Championship.